Program is brought to you by the Kansas City Business Association.
Carlos Nelson with What's Up Kansas City, and today we have the House Representative for the 36th District, House Rep Mark Sharp. Welcome to the program, Mark.
Hey, Carlos, and thanks for having me.
Hey, Mark, let's get right into it.
Okay.
Tell our audience a little bit what you've done in the term that you have served that you're proud of, and then let's go into what it is you plan to do if you retain your seat.
Sure. Thank you, Carlos. Well, this past session, things that I was really in huge support of, obviously, would be legislation that would help reduce our city's horrendous homicide rate and the violent crime rate that we have here in general. There were a few bills that I wanted to mention. A bill that I had co-sponsored, and it almost got passed. Unfortunately, we had COVID, so a lot of things were cut short. But House Bill 2207 would actually enact a pretrial witness protection program fund for Missouri, and like the federal government has had for decades. So obviously, if you're in a federal case, you have that witness protection program in case you need it. Here in Missouri, that isn't the case. You see sometimes where witnesses could live in the same neighborhood as some of these folks that are involved in crimes. And we don't have that kind of witness protection fund currently to keep those witnesses safe.
Well, they really need that from my perspective. How you expect somebody to come forth with some evidence, especially in a murder case or something, and the people, your next door neighbors?
Right. So we have to get that one. We have to get that one through, and I think next year we'll have more time to do it. This was actually sponsored by a Republican at a Lee Summit, I believe, Representative Patterson. So this is a bill that I think will get a lot of bipartisan support, and I look forward to supporting it again next year.
All right, go on with some of the other things that you attempted to do or was able to do in your term.
Okay. Well, yes, House Bill 1964 would strengthen the penalties against intimidating victims and witnesses. So again, this would be another one that would be to try to add some protection for those witnesses. Again, the crime rate here in Kansas City, and not just Kansas City, we have 3 of the top 20 homicide rates, with Kansas City, St. Louis, and Springfield making that list now. So we have to do something. We have to try to do our best to protect our witnesses, to be able to come forth and try to solve and really prevent some of these crimes from happening in the future.
Do you have an opinion on, as of late, behind the Floyd incident, a lot of states and cities are trying to take power and be over the police force, the police department?
Sure. Well, obviously right now, a big issue, and has been a big issue for a long time, is getting local control for the police department here in Kansas City. Right now, it is controlled by the state or the board, and we have people on the board like Mayor Lucas who can have an impact, but it really needs to be under control here locally. I know the Black Caucus is going to be sending in a letter to the governor requesting that we have a special session called for police reform. And we really need to get back in there and address some of these situations that have continued to flood our social media, that continue to disrupt our normal way of living. I mean, there are a lot of Black folks that saw that video who still haven't really mentally bounced back from watching. And we have to go out here in our communities, at our jobs, and try to pretend to act normal, knowing that we have this frustration inside. And obviously, we see it with the riots, we see it with the protests, and understandably so. But in order to prevent those things from continuing to happen, I think it is necessary that we come back to a special session and try to address some of these issues we have. It's only the responsible thing to do, and that's what we're here for.
So some of the main problems, as I see it, that we have, and I don't know how the state or what the House or you state reps can do, is an economic problem in the African-American community. A lot of things are born out of lack of inclusion into the economic matrix of basically the United States, but specifically here in Kansas City, for African-American business.
Sure. Well, there's again another section of life that has disproportionate numbers against the African American community. Really, it is our job here in the state legislature to support really any initiatives here in the city, locally, at the state level that support not only MBE, minority businesses, but also women's.
WMBEs.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So we have, there's work to do on both ends, but certainly within the African.
Because I was going to ask you to address this because of the way your district is structured. For your other constituents that are not minorities, what do you have for them, and what would you say to them, speaking to them directly right now?
Well, right now it's really up to us to support all local businesses. I mean, obviously, we want to try to support those businesses that are struggling the most when it comes to the MBE and WBE situations, but we want to support all businesses. So it doesn't matter if your business is over here in Ruskin Mills or if your business is over there at Redbridge and Warnell. I mean, we need to support all businesses, and not just not just in one section, but across the board, across the district.
Have you had any of the businesses or the people in your district calling you, texting you, or contacting you in reference to some things that they'd like to see done or some things that are not being done?
Sure. Well, obviously during the pandemic, we had a lot of constituents who were small business owners reaching out with their concerns with the state being closed down and this temporary close down, keeping folks out of restaurants and keeping folks out of small businesses. So there were a lot of emails and a lot of calls in regards to that. But it really was one of those things where we really just had to weather that storm as best as we can. And a lot of folks talk about we're in phase 2 of COVID. We're still in phase 1 of COVID. So as we're reopening, we need to be very careful of how we're living life now. I made a post the other day on social media where life is different now. The norm is wearing a mask. The norm is social distancing. The norm is being much more careful than what we were before. And I'm still not sure if many of us understand. And even still, we're about 6 weeks out of my election. And I'm still leery of knocking on doors because I know folks still want to be careful. And as eager as I want to get out there and talk to people, safety's got to come first.
You know what? I'm of the same ilk, Mark. By me being in the media, and specifically, we're internet-based company, so we have to be on the Facebooks, the Instagrams, the Twitter. I think we just halfway through the first period because Texas, Miami, and Florida, and what have you, those businesses opened up, and the next week they closed up because that C-19 just spiked. And I think it's very important to have a strong economy, and everybody wants to do business. But if half the population's catching the disease until we get some type of vaccine, I just don't see it myself. And you know, when you came in and did your first interview, we was sitting side by side. But you see, even with myself, I was like, I like those type interviews, but I like being alive also. So you better hurry up.
We were just in the beginning of it then. So
right.
we still had some leeway back then, but not anymore. Not anymore. And the national message, and it's coming from the top down, obviously, that things are getting better, and that's not the case at all. And if we're talking about COVID, I mean, I have to mention how African Americans really right now are being hit by 2 pandemics, and one has been going on since the beginning, and now we're dealing with this too. So it's just and I'm glad there is so much positivity and going towards the Black community right now, and I'm glad we're getting a lot of this low-hanging fruit with changing sports names and having these conversations and removing Confederate statues and changing Aunt Jemima's name. I'm glad we're doing all these things. That's nice. But again, until we get back down to justice, until we get some legislation passed, we're not really doing anything. And I mean, these things are nice, but they're long overdue, in my opinion. I'm really, really excited about representing a very diverse district, stretching from state line all the way east to Raytown Road. And I really believe that I'm the right person to represent that area. Being raised there, being born there, graduated from Hickman Mills in 2004. Some of the connections
let's not forget our South Suburban tenure coming up.
Well, yeah, and then of course the sports side of it, but that's where my competitiveness comes in. And I'm sorry, but the people of South Kansas City need to realize that if they sit on the sidelines August 4th, there's a potential that they could have somebody who's elected who doesn't know the difference between Blue Ridge Boulevard and Blue Ridge Road. And that's a problem. We need to have somebody in who's not in just for their own personal ambitions. Somebody who wants
what I would say, cutting you off a little bit, this is a real time for all of our political people to show some real leadership. And leadership is not always playing it safe. Leadership is when you know what's right, and this is in my estimation, so let me clarify that statement. Leadership is not always doing what's popular. And I put that with this covert that, because the president or this one is saying we need to do this or do this. Leadership is about protecting your people. And that means in your case, protecting your district, which is a multicultural district. But this is what I say, because a lot of your district possibly will be watching this interview. As it relates to the Floyd situation and the lack of economics and the redlining and all the things that go on, that really has prompted all of these demonstrations, to the majority community. This is Mr. Nelson saying his piece. It's really not our problem as minorities, because you have the power, and I think that you need to talk to one another about getting on board and changing the situation. It wasn't your fault how things fell from the early 1900s, but you have the power to correct it. And just like it takes leadership from our politicians, it takes individual responsibility to bring our community together. And that's where I am going with Mark, that he has this large district that covers everyone. And that means the decisions that he makes as it relates to the legislation and things that he is behind is not only representing African Americans, it's representing you. And I think you need to do your part to support what he's doing. End the story from Mr. Nelson. So Mark, what do you have that you feel you want to do if you retain your seat for the next 2 years?
Well, obviously, I want to continue to pick up where I left off with some legislation that we had moving last year. Last year was, and we're still finishing up, obviously. Session ended in May, but, the next session won't start until January. But, with COVID, with the protests, with so many things happening, even early in session, I had a chance to have a gun bill moving as a freshman. And I thought that was pretty good. Because it's real tough to get any kind of gun bill moving because it's such a hot topic. And anytime you mention the gun bill, most folks who have any say-so on it just run for the hills because they don't want anything to do with it. And as a freshman,
you're supposed to be quiet. and
you're supposed to sit in your place. Exactly. You're supposed to sit in your place and nod your head and be nice and get along. But that's not what people elected me for. And I have some would say I have some big shoes. So my freshman year, I wanted to make a big splash. And if that means partnering with other Republican leadership, like Representative Fokker, who is the chair of the General Laws Committee, who heard my Blair's Law, which would make it the state offense for celebratory gunfire, working with Representative Nick Schroer out of the St. Charles District, we partnered on that bill together and presented together and had that bill passed 12-1 at a committee. And strongly believe that had this COVID not happened, this bill would have been heard on the floor and eventually agreed to and finally passed. And so when you ask me what I plan on looking forward to doing next year, that's where I plan on picking up, as well as the my A+ schools bill, which would make it easier for some of our students to get access to that scholarship funding for community colleges, especially out here in South Kansas City, where so many of our students live in transient homes and are bouncing back and forth between schools that otherwise would have met the qualifications to get those to get that scholarship money to those community colleges. So there's a lot of things we have to do. Yeah.
So what you're saying is, and I'm distilling it, that you have the ability to work across the aisle to accomplish some goals that you think that will benefit not only your district but Kansas City overall community.
Oh, well, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, it's, in Jeff City, it's all about relationships. It's all about perception. It's all about optics. If you're one of those Democrats that is constantly, barking at the other side, causing stuff with the other side, it's going to be real tough to gain content. So I learned that in the first week. I don't want to be that person. So I did my most, my best work really, not on the floor, but in the side gallery, in the hallways, or at the basketball court for basketball nights on Tuesdays, or when we were playing softball. It's those conversations. Not everything's going to happen in the Capitol. Sometimes those conversations have to happen offline to actually get something accomplished, because they have to see you as somebody, as an ally, and not as somebody who's just going to throw them under the bus the first chance you get. And the funny thing is, 80 to 90% of the things that we vote on down there, we agree on. So there's no reason to start any fights with the people that ultimately control how the legislature is run. Right.
So in winding up, what would be your parting words to your constituents and to the overall community?
Well, my parting words would be go vote. Make sure you vote. There are forces at power, forces working to try to eliminate your ability to vote. And speaking of voting, one good thing that was actually passed before we got out was lightening some of the restrictions on absentee voting. So let me talk about this for a second, because there are a lot of folks, especially in my district, who are older, 65 and up, who probably don't want to go to a voting poll, but still want to vote. So there's a few things. If you are 65 and older, obviously you're at a higher risk of catching COVID. You can absentee vote a without a notary signature, or a notary for your signature.
How do
You
they
can
go
call
about
in.
that?
Okay, so you can call into the Kansas City Election Board. I believe the number is 842-4820, 842-4820. You can call the election board. I called them earlier to confirm this. You can call them in and request an absentee ballot if you're 65 and up, or if you have a health condition, no matter what age you are. If you have a health condition, you can request the absentee ballot without a notary signature. And if 65 and up, and if you have a health condition.
What is the time limit, if you might know, that you have to have this done by?
God, I think.
But if you don't know, you put it on my mind, and I'm going to call, and I'm going to make a special promo for that, saying for people that are 65 or older or have special health conditions, if you want the absentee ballot, bam, bam, bam. I'm glad you brought that up, because I wouldn't have been doing that, and that would come under our.
Well, yeah, there's been some. I think there's been some confusion in the community of thinking that nothing has really changed with the absentee voting. But a lot has changed, actually. I mean, 65 and up, not requiring a notary for your signature. That's pretty big.
That's big.
That's real big, actually. So, and I'm not sure. I know they're going to open up more polls for the August 4th election. What I was told was it should be 2 polls per ward. So we'll see. But with the influx here lately, I'm not sure. So we'll have to see what COVID-19 continues to do. Hopefully Missourians are continuing to be a little more careful than what we have been. And hopefully we can get more polls opened up and make it easier for everybody.
Hey, Mark, it was a pleasure having you on the show. And we'll have a close eye on this election. And we wish you the best of luck.